So, Sister Liz, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm so glad to be here. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing very well too. I'm doing really well. You know, we're in the company of Charity Podcast today, and want you to think back to November 20th. We were just a young podcast, just 5 episodes in. November 20th, 2018. Can you remember?
When we had Josephine and Sister Salvatrice and Sister Mary John on the podcast. Right.
It was a trifecta. It was a trinity.
A trinity, if you will.
Josephine, are you with us?
I'm here.
You've been living with the sisters, but you've actually known the sisters for much, much longer. And so just give us a little background about who you are and where you're coming from.
Actually, it's kind of funny because I actually knew Sister Liz when I first met the Daughters of Charity.
Woo!
I was a 15-year-old awkward high schooler. My family had just moved from Ohio to Emmitsburg, Maryland, where the Basilica of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is, and she was one of the saints of our community. And when I moved
Elizabeth Ann Seton, not Sister Liz.
No, different Elizabeth.
She's now, different Elizabeth.
You have to be dead first before you can be sainted, so.
There you go. So you were in Emmitsburg and you met Sister Liz.
Yes.
And changed her life, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the better.
Oh, nice answer. Good job. Okay, continue on.
Go on.
Well, I also got involved with that parish right away. It was St. Joseph Church in Emmitsburg, and they had a week-long service trip in Germantown, Philadelphia that they did every summer. And my family moved there, and 2 weeks later, I went on that service trip for the first time. And there were some Daughters of Charity on that were living in Germantown, so I kind of met them a little bit, but I really got an insight to how to live as a community in service for those who were poor without even really realizing it at the time. Because as our group of high schoolers, and I was just a newbie, hadn't even been in Emmitsburg for that long, but the way that the other high schoolers just welcomed me, we began each day with daily mass, we went out to serve, and then we came back and talked about where we met Christ. That kind of planted a seed in me as to what I thought religious life should be like, because I had been kind of playing around with the idea of becoming a sister since I was in middle school, but I had never really met any real live sisters, didn't really have an idea of what it would be like. But from that Germantown experience, I thought that religious life should be like a lifelong service trip. Well, when I came back from that service trip, I began to volunteer at the villa in Emmitsburg, which was right behind the church and was for the retired Daughters of Charity. And I got my National Honor Society hours for my high school through that, but I also just enjoyed being with the sisters, hearing their experiences and making their experiences my own. I think that's having those relationships with the older sisters and then also having that Germantown, Philadelphia service trip really kind of set the basis for God eventually inviting and leading me to the Daughters and where I am today.
And so, like all vocation stories, there's always more to the story.
Oh, yes.
The twists and turns of life. And so one might assume, based on your what you've just said, that, you know, you just entered and it was great and smooth sailing. So can you say a little bit more about the twists and turns piece of it?
Yeah, can we call it more of a U-turn?
You can call it whatever you want.
So I had met the Daughters and was going on lots of discernment retreats with different communities. I kind of got to know the Salesian sisters. There were some Dominicans, there were some Sisters of Jesus Our Hope, IHM sisters. I actually have a great aunt who's an IHM sister. But then there was a community that I thought was truly like the ideal. I think I'm going to call it Community A. So Community A was the ideal. And I encountered them when I was a junior in high school. And I was like, oh my goodness, this community is beautiful. They had long habits. They prayed the liturgy of the hours together. They prayed the rosary together. They all lived together. It's kind of institutional with how the food was being cooked and the laundry was done, et cetera, but they all lived together and prayed together, and just the beauty of that really attracted me, their prayer life and their community life. And so when I was a junior in high school, I went on my first retreat with them, and I went on 3 more retreats with them and asked for an application paper to become a postulant with them. And after I graduated high school, I did end up joining, and they accepted me. And I was a postulant with them for 6 months. And during that time, I definitely matured in my prayer life because it was so emphasized. We only had about 2 hours a day when we could have recreational talk. Other than that, we only talked for prayers or during our classes, which covered everything from scripture to how to be a religious to the catechism. So it definitely was a very kind of intensive and very intentional growing time for me in my prayer life and in my knowledge of our faith. And so for that, I'm grateful. But when I started discerning with them, I think I kind of lost sight of myself in some ways. I was 18 years old. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted. I didn't have that full self-knowledge, and I still don't, but I'm growing in it more, and I have more than I did when I was 18. And I think looking back now, I would have discerned out on my own anyways, because it didn't have that element of service that really attracted me to that idea of religious life in the beginning. But it was a very good experience to have, and I'm glad that I took the leap of faith to trying it out. Because when you try something out, you know what God is and is not calling you to. And it's very important to find out what he's not calling you to in order to find what he is. And sometimes people just have to go in a roundabout U-turn way.
And so, when I've known several people who've joined communities, discerned through, or went to the seminary for a little bit of time and then discerned out. And I think sometimes there's a fear of people in discernment to even take the leap because of the fear of just that, of figuring out that it's not the right thing, or that that's not God's path for them. Mm-hmm. Or maybe to see it as a failure of some kind, that, I couldn't cut it, or this wasn't for me, or was this really God's will if I came then left? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I've shared a couple with my mom and with some friends that I kind of compared it to something that's a little bit more accessible to our culture. So dating. It's all right to date a guy or two before you find the one. It's okay to find out what personalities and different guys you might be interested in. Well, when you're discerning religious life, you need to kind of enter into that dating relationship with the community in order to find out what they're really like, and for them to find out what you're really like. And it's not a failure when a boyfriend and a girlfriend break up. It doesn't mean that they're not called to marriage. So I think it's the same for religious life. With Community A, I entered into a very serious dating relationship with them. And Community A and I decided that there were some things that just weren't working out, but that didn't mean that I wasn't called to religious life. So 3.5 years later, I found the Daughters of Charity, and I really felt a sense of peace and joy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try this again. And I wasn't a failure for having tried it one time previously. It was just another learning experience for me to have along the road.
Does that
Yeah,
sound familiar, Sister Elizabeth?
it does sound a little familiar.
With the
So,
people you work with?
yeah. Well, and as vocation director, when I was vocation director, it was often I would say to people, don't not trying and not thinking about answering God's call is the failure. When you do it, no matter how you do it, that's going to be the success. If God's calling you, He'll guide you to where you're supposed to be. And it doesn't mean, I like your analogy with dating, because it doesn't mean that there might not be heartbreak. It may be some confusion and some hesitation about letting go or discerning out or something, but that God will guide you. Trust that. I also, when I was in the seminary, actually, when I got out, just came out of the seminary, which to those listening is Daughter of Charity novitiate, basically. When I came out, I too kind of felt a little out of balance, basically. And so I loved your comment about that you went into lifelong service trip. I thought it's a great way to think about this. But I think the thing, though, that really strikes me in this part of your story, anyways, is that I think we're all trying to find that balance of prayer and service. And sometimes the prayer part, the contemplative side, is very strong in us, is very strong in me. I mean, I always say whenever I move into a new city, the first thing I look for is a Trappist monastery or any equivalent thereof, because that is a big part of my personal kind of spiritual life, my way in which I communicate with God. And I went to a Trappist monastery for a short while and discerned whether that was a life for me. And I had already been in the community for a while, so I get the dilemma of finding your heart kind of tugging one way or the other. And I also appreciated your comments about maturing into something. 18 is very young, but I came at 36, which is very old in the sense that you're more established. It's harder to move into something that's going to kind of be a control in your life when you've had everything at your own control and disposal. So there's not a total parallel, but I get the desire to kind of find that balance and being into something and saying this feels like the right place, and then to get there and realize, it's this service piece, and that is really where the Daughter of Charity finds her vocation, is in being friends with people who are poor, finding that place where you meet God in those who are vulnerable, just the beauty of God in the poor that He told us we will always have with us, and they are the blessed of God. And so, so that's great. I love that part of the story. I can't wait to hear the rest of it. Now that you've made your U-turn, you've rediscovered the daughters, right? I mean, you had known us somewhat prior to this experience. Now you've come wiser and a little bit more experienced. So where does the story go from there?
Where does the story go from there? So, I guess after I left Community A, I moved back into my parents' house and kind of took a break from religious life and discernment. I went to college. I went on a mission trip to Lima, Peru. I went to World Youth Day in Poland. Kind of did some normal young adult things. But then in 2015, I went to a Sikh conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and Sister Teresa Sullivan was running the Daughters of Charity vocation booth. And I figured I'd walk over there and say hi, because, I had volunteered with the older sisters when I was in high school. I already had
There
a
you
toe
go.
in. So I was like, why not? I'll just go over and say hi. But Sister Teresa ended up being a very big help to me. She helped me a lot with just talking to me, like once or twice a month. She would call me up on the phone, see how things were going. She helped me through discerning again after having left Community A. And she started to invite me on retreats, and eventually after my World Youth Day experience, actually, I was like, I'm ready to take a second leap of faith and apply to enter this community. So I was a pre-postulant in New Orleans, as we heard on episode 5 way back when.
November 20th, 2018 to be exact. Go check it out.
Go back and listen.
Go back and listen.
But after my pre-postulancy year, I applied to continue on with the daughters, and I am towards the end of my second year, my postulancy year, and I have been living in Belleville, Illinois, which is right outside of East St. Louis. And during the school year, I was assistant teaching at Sister Thea Bowman Catholic School, which is the last Catholic school in East St. Louis. And having that experience with the children and being able to give a backpack to a little boy in one of the classes who he had spilled chocolate milk all over his backpack, and his mom just threw it away and didn't replace it. And so we had a donation of backpacks come in, and I was able to take from that and give to him. So just those little experiences. There was another little girl whose zipper broke off of her winter jacket. Well, we had a donation of winter jackets come in, and I was able to get her a winter jacket from that. And just everything that the children taught me about gratitude and love, even in the midst of all their challenges. And then my community's support during this year just has grown my desire to continue, even though there's been ups and downs, times when I was like, oh my goodness, what is this community that I am discerning with?
Who are these crazy people?
Can't imagine saying such a thing.
But I think, that's part of the growing up that I did after leaving Community A, was that I had thought that Community A was the ideal, the perfect. And it really isn't a perfect community. And just like there isn't a perfect husband or a perfect wife, we all have our flaws. But for some reason, the flaws in me, the Daughters of Charity accept, and they think that they can work with. And the flaws in them, I can accept, and I can work with them too. And hopefully we'll all get to heaven together.
We'll get there.
Yeah, it's quite healthy, I think, for you to know those things now, at this point, at the end of your postulancy, to be able to say, what's, what I'm struggling with, what I'm working toward, the perfection or the goodness or whatever it is. I feel like I'm working toward, the community is working toward its own as well. We know.
So we're all just human.
That's right. We're all just human. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's great. So your humanness and our humanness have met, and we're moving along together. That's fabulous.
As of August 10th, 2019, you will 15 more days from now.
It will be Sister Josephine in the Daughters of Charity Seminary /
Woo! There you go. Yay!
But nobody else is allowed to call me Sister Josephine until then.
That's right.
I've been calling you that in my heart since you were in high school.
What? Wait, you said that. I was a little sickening in sleep.
It's going to be an honor and a privilege to call you sister in a few short days.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
what advice would you give to some people out there who might be listening, who need a little nudge, who are thinking about God's plan, not necessarily for priesthood or religious life, consecrated life, but who are just wondering, what do I do? What advice would you give them?
Well, definitely spend time in prayer with whatever you're discerning. I think it's very helpful to journal about what you're feeling, because I think that God really speaks to us through our feelings. And being able to look back on where you felt the most peace or the most joy, the most happiness. It's not 100% all the time peaceful, joyful, and happy, but where do you feel that most of the time? And then when you've discovered where and when that is and with whom, then you kind of just need to go for it. Not be afraid to enter into that religious community or the seminary, or maybe a more serious intentional friendship with somebody, or go to pursuing that degree in whatever field you are feeling most called to. You kind of just need to jump in, dive in, and experience it, because through those experiences, God also speaks. And you need to be open to receiving that.
We're so grateful for you. We welcome you, Josephine, soon to be Sister Josephine.
Soon to be Sister Josephine. Incorporated on August 10th, Feast of St. Lawrence. Yay! That's great.
And just to wrap up, thank you all for listening, for supporting the podcast. If you love Josephine as much as we do, you will share this episode with everyone that you know and celebrate with her on this momentous occasion.
Absolutely. And please pray for her. This is a very special time. So keep sister, soon to be Sister Josephine, in your prayers. Because by the time you hear this, she will in fact be Sister Josephine. So keep her in your prayers and pray continually for vocations to the little company and to religious life around the world.
Thanks everybody for listening.
This has been In the Company of Charity podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.